Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome all of you today to Commercial Business Model Design, brought to you in collaboration with Lisa and Matthew Weber. I'm sorry my camera is not functioning today, but you will definitely see me in some picture somewhere. Um, so Matthew is a lead alum. He's one of the world's foremost experts in transformation and global supply chain. He has led the transformations and operations of many multi-billion dollar organizations across the globe, and he's also an author of the best-selling book Fit for Disruption: How to Transform Your Business and Thrive in Times of Rapid Change. He also runs a podcast with the same name, focused on innovations and disruption in various industries. Regarding Lisa, most of you already know us, but still a brief introduction. The Lead Incubator and Startup Accelerator, or Lisa, was founded by Stanford GSP Lead participants for the Lead community. It's designed to bring together innovators and startup founders to incubate ideas to MVP and then to help them scale these ventures globally. My name is Deepti Pava, founding partner at Lisa. The other founding members of Lisa are Kira Dangol, Edward Munt, Pavel Ezletsky, Misha Baikov, and Joe Anthony. We at Lisa always strive to bring forward workshops and engaging sessions through collaborations with the wonderful lead groups and the very talented leaders within our community for the benefit of Lisa cohort members to help aid their journey from idea to MVP. And for today's session, we partnered with Matthew to design this session in specific for our cohort's needs on how to design a strategic, commercial, and operational structure for a new venture to enable value creation. And given most participants are in the prototyping or testing stage within the cohort at the moment, we believe this would help you start thinking commercial about your startup ideas. So today's session will cover four key components: strategic planning, governance framework, business planning, and profit and cost control. I just want to bring to your notice that today's session is one of the two sessions that we are doing with Matthew. We will have a second session on governance frameworks workshop tomorrow at the same time. So without taking much of your time, over to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Deepti, and thank you for the very nice and warm introduction. And of course, thank you everybody for joining in today. It's quite a privilege to spend the next hour or so with you, and also tomorrow. Um, I guess, and I am calling in from, also I'm logging in from Australia in Melbourne. It seems here we either have fires or we have floods, so we haven't quite, we sort of get both extremes at the moment. At the moment, my heart goes out to the people in New South Wales who are experiencing some pretty horrific conditions with the floods. Um, as Deepti said, today's session is around commercial performance, and the four topics that are covered will be around strategic planning, and that's how to develop a strategy and a strategic plan. Then we'll talk about a governance framework, and why that's important, to help you maintain control. We'll talk about designing a business intelligence capability, just so you have visibility. And then we'll talk about profit and cost control. What I would like to say at the outset before I really jump into it is some of these concepts you may wonder as you're going through it why they're important to touch on now when you're in between idea to MVP stage. And what I would really like to communicate today is that it's never ever too early to start designing in the commercial parameters of your venture. In fact, I think it can actually help structure and help inform where you want to go and where you need to go. I think the trick, though, will of course be how to balance that, um, and you need to make sure that you give the right amount of weight to this. Uh, but you can't spend all day, every living moment on it, because otherwise you won't actually get done what you're doing. So it's not to paralyze you. It is there it's absolutely there to help you. And today's, and my screen, of course, is locked up. Hold on a second. Of course, just a quick thing to say that none of this, because we are talking commercials and financials. Obviously, if you do need proper advice, you should go and seek some good counsel based upon your particular circumstance. Where I wanted to start today's session, and sorry, I will take one step. For this session, we will go through those 4 elements that we spoke about. There'll also be some templates or some canvases that can be applied. We won't go into any of that in any detail today, purely because I just want to give you the conceptual overlay of commercial frameworks today. And tomorrow, when we talk about governance, we'll look more into some of the canvases and how they may apply. But I think that the starting point is we live in a very disruptive world, and that feels like a statement that is just thrown out, thrown out there because, obviously we've had COVID and there's so many other things that are going on. The reason why I raise it today is because I want you to really think about what is going to drive your commercial performance, and whether that is in fact whether in fact your venture is actually being created by the very fact that there is a disruption, or whether it is, or whether your business actually needs to keep in mind about what the risks are that can potentially come in and build that in. And if we just look at some of the obvious the obvious disruptions that can take play, we obviously have COVID-19, which is probably the mother of all disruptions. Well, certainly has been in the last 100 years. But we've seen many good examples about how businesses have been able to change and pivot. But we've also seen the opposite, where businesses have struggled and failed to cope under that amount of pressure. Obviously, everything is moving to digital. We've moved from the industrial age to definitely a digital age. It is the century of Asia, so there's both the geopolitical environment and the economic environment is certainly shifting across the globe, and there's certainly a lot of activity in Asia that we can't ignore at the moment. There's demographic shifts, so particularly with aging populations, and that will become a massive consideration for the future, particularly around aged care. We have issues around cybersecurity and how we use data, how we protect people's information. And we have just the fact that customer expectations have changed, and people want, and we have our phones, and we have our, we are digital, like I was touching on before, and the expectation is a lot faster, and definitely the weight has shifted in terms of the power to the customer, where they have so many options. Now, there's of course the environmental shocks that come with that. I spoke about here in Australia, we have the, we've come off massive fires, and now we're in floods. So there's some real concerns there. But are they going to disrupt your product, or are they going to, or is it going to be the very reason for its existence? And of course, there's a whole lot of ethical implications as we're more global and as we go end to end. And the ethical part is very important from a commercial perspective, for a couple of reasons. Needless to say, it's obviously about doing the right thing. And also, if you can't do this in a way, I mean, if you have to operate your venture in a way that compromises some ethical attributes, then you really need to question why you're doing it in the first place. And in actual fact, a lot of the ethical the challenges that we're faced with today can actually be embedded into your commercial model, and we can commercialize that. So it's also a way for us to be able to solve some of the world's problems in a meaningful way, and do that through business. I should add, absolutely won't go through this, but what I'm presenting to you here is you'll have a workbook, and there will be some exercise you can go through in your own time, just to basically reflect and think about what some of those issues are in your business. But I guess the big question here, and the one that I really want you to think about, is how vulnerable your idea or your MVP will be to disruption. So you do need to cast your mind forward and think about how this idea can be potentially disrupted, or is it disruption that is the very reason that it's existing? So you might be solving a very meaningful environmental challenge, for example, and that's why it exists. But I think that is the first point that I want you to start thinking about from a commercial point of view. I know that that's very high level, and we'll start coming down, but those issues are quite important. So I think now what I would like to do is to define what do we mean by commercial, and this can mean different things to different people, and of course in different regions. But here we're principally we are to, I mean these are the dictionary definitions, but it's not too far from where we want to go, and that is we are in the business of commerce, and we are intending to make a profit. So I'm going with the starting assumption that your idea, as you move it to MVP and as you move it beyond, is the intent is to make it profitable. Now, even if it is a social enterprise that or social product that you're developing, I guess the basic premise is that you want it to be profitable so that you can reinvest that into your business and to fulfill the purpose that you need or that you're hoping to do. But there's a number of principles that I'd like to run you through. The first principle is that your business, regardless of whether it's a social enterprise or a pure commercial enterprise, is that it has to be commercially viable. If you cannot create this in a way that is commercially viable in the long term, then obviously it creates significant challenges, but you won't be able to meet the ambitions that you have. The second principle is the commercial side of the business does not have to be boring. And I know sometimes when we're doing product development or we're doing workshops around concept design and things like that, that can be so exciting, but doing the nuts and bolts is often viewed as a very, very boring part of it. It doesn't have to be boring, particularly when you're engaging partners and others in understanding what the commercial lens is. The third principle, and I know that this is pretty straightforward for most of you, but being commercial is a fundamental foundation of business that cannot be ignored. If you get your foundations right, I mean, the old analogy, if you get your foundations right, you can build a solid structure on top of it. But if you don't have that foundation right, everything can potentially crumble. And this is why it's so important that this is communicated and that you have this at top of your mind as you're in your idea to MVP stage, is that you are building in a solid foundation as you go through. The other thing is you can't delegate commercial responsibility, particularly as a leader of your product, leader of your new organization or for your new venture. It's not something that you can just go, here, I'll give to an accountant, or here, I'll give to my business advisor. This is something that you need to take personal responsibility for as a leader and somebody that wants to make your venture work and operate. I touched on this a bit earlier, that you might be asking yourself, why is this so important to touch on now? And that is because we are fundamentally talking about building the foundations. But again, what we don't want you to do is for this to monopolize all of your attention. What we do want to do is to focus your attention. And the next principle, and this is probably one of the most important, particularly as you grow past the MVP stage, is the investor community will rate you on your commercial acumen and stewardship. So if you think about the two differences here, if you're able to articulate and demonstrate how commercial you are and how your acumen around being commercial is so strong, then it is likely that you'll build and attract the confidence of investors as you build, as you seek that investment funding. Conversely, if you don't, the investors will lose confidence, and then you risk of not getting the investment you need to push forward. So they're the principles, and there again, we're sort of starting at a high level, and we just want to layer it and just work our way down and work our way through. And again, this session is very much to walk you through what you need to understand about the commercial frameworks, and then tomorrow, as Deepti said, we'll go into more detail within some canvases and so forth. But I do have some canvases here for you just on the commercial side. What's important here is that we discuss communicating and presenting commercial information. One of the biggest risks that you will have when you apply yourself to doing financial and commercial management is you'll create a whole bunch of spreadsheets that nobody will understand. Maybe you might. But the whole thing here is that what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to communicate this commercial information. We want it to help you. We want it to help you attract investors. We want it to help attract people. We want it to help attract partners. So to be able to attract all of that into your venture, you need to be able to communicate your commercial information. And there's a couple of really simple measures that you can use to be able to effectively communicate this commercial information. Now, the very first is keep it simple. Now, that might seem, almost too simple to put on, but what I see time and time again is we develop these really clever financial models and things that just confuse people. But what you need to be able to do, and that might, in some instances, that might be appropriate, but you need to be able to lift that up and summarize it in a way that the person that you're communicating to understands it. And the best way that you can do that, well, I mean, this is something I used to do, is I used to actually tell the concept to one of my children. Not when they were 5, but when they were sort of in their, sort of in their teens. And if they could understand the concept or understand what I was saying, that was probably where I knew that that it was simple enough. But if they were sort of there, scratching their head, then I knew that I hadn't simplified it enough so that it could be easily communicated. A lot of the time in financial information and commercial information, we're talking about the past. So we look about what historically has happened, what happened, what was the profit for last period, what happened. Our annual report is looking behind us. The important thing, particularly for you, is that we need to be able to project that forward. And because you're at MVP stage or idea to MVP stage, you need to be able to articulate what the future looks like. And of course, you need to be able to tell an impactful story with it. Talk about what you're changing, what impacts you're going to have in the world, what it actually means to you in your heart, right? And those things will attract your people, your partners, and your investors. And sometimes when we talk about people and when we talk about financials and commercial, we think that it's very structured and that it's not something that you can put emotion into. Well, you absolutely can. You can just use the two to complement it to tell an impactful story. The next one is less is more, and that's very much very much like keeping it simple. We don't have to keep overlaying it with information. Just give people what they need, and of course, make it visual so people can see it. It's a lot nicer to look at, say, a graphic like this than what it would be a spreadsheet, and I think your audience would appreciate that even more. Sometimes your audience will change when you communicate the information. What you tell your partners or the people that you're hoping to attract as partners may be very different to what you're telling your investors or whoever else it might be. So you do, whilst there'll be a solid core to it, you may need to tailor your message to the right people. Linking in with telling an impactful story, you do need that quantitative and qualitative. Not everything you can measure, not in quantitative perspective. So you certainly need those qualitative aspects. And the most important thing that you can get around communicating your commercial information is that it incites action. It makes people want to do something. It makes people get up and take action. So that's around communicating commercial information. Now, just before we jump into the commercial framework, I do want to, when you think about your value proposition, as it is now in your idea to MVP stage, I want you to understand from a commercial perspective, it's not you that defines value. It's your customer that will define the value. And that's such a fundamental, important thing to keep hold of from a commercial performance point of view. Because if we don't, and we let our own internal numbers and our own commercial dialogue tell the picture, we have that the wrong way around. We have to make sure that it's the customer that is determining the value. So we have a commercial model. And there's 4 relatively easy or intuitive steps that you need to think about. And some of this you would have already done, particularly as you build out your business model canvas and so forth. But this is about probably taking it another, again, get the high, but then take it a bit lower and really get into the how. So the first is developing a strategy and a strategic plan. Know what business you're in and why, but importantly, know how you're going to execute that. Second, build a governance framework that helps you maintain control. Then design business intelligence capability. And all we're talking about there is just being able to know that you've got visibility of your business. And then to make sure that you're in control of your costs and that you're working towards making profit. We won't go through these activities, but the one thing I do want you to think about is what level of planning is appropriate at the MVP stage. And again, my steer to you is make sure that you don't monopolize all your time, just use it to focus. But just keep in mind that you need to build the foundation, because if you continue to build something that will not be commercial, then that will be a lot harder to unpick as you go later on. So we'll focus now on developing a strategy and strategic plan, and this is very much about why you're in business and how to get there. So you do need to understand the why. And what business you're in. So if I talk about the why is easy. I guess I don't. Most people will be obviously familiar with Simon Sinek's version of the why. But if we even look at the what, you could think of I guess an easy example would be Kodak. If Kodak thought they were in the business of film, that would be one way of looking at it. But the other way of looking at it is that they were in the business of memories, and that could have fundamentally changed how they looked at their business model. I touched on the second point earlier on, which is around your strategic plan is a means of communication. It is a means to get confidence from your partners, your people, your potential investors. Your strategy not only helps you focus and helps where you're going, it helps build the confidence with the people that you're working with. You need to be able to articulately state what your aspirations, goals, and objectives are. But importantly from there, you need to think about what the operational tactics are. So you might be a physical e-commerce store, or you might be an information application, whatever it is, you need to think about what operations you need to set yourself up, even at the MVP stage. What needs to happen and what needs to happen when, by who. The resource planning comes into it. And of course, your strategic plan should very much map out how you're going to manage your finance, management, and reporting. But the thing that's really, really fundamental here is that you put first things first and you get the basics right, which is, again, the point that I keep coming back to with why this is so important at this stage of the journey. Because if you get the basics right, you can build upon that. I've given some bonus material at the back end of this, which if we get time, I can probably flick through it. But I provide what I call the Moonshot Maturity Canvas. And it basically walks through, how to set up your basics and how to plan initiatives around that and then build upon that all the way through to achieving your moonshot. So the question that I really want to ask you now is, what is your ambition, and how can you make it as big as possible? Now, I'm just mindful, I have been speaking at you for quite some time. So just to break it up a bit, does anyone want to share maybe what their journey is, or what their MVP is, and what they're actually aspiring to get to?
I'm sorry, could you kind of rephrase the question, or kind of give it a little bit more context?
Yeah, sure. Just from your perspective. Yeah, no, that's okay. Just from your perspective, we're just interested in hearing what your ambition is and what your project is.
Let me just jump in for a second here. Russell, it might be a little bit that this is actually designed for the cohort members of Lisa originally. What he means to ask is that if you are a startup working on a project, what your ambition is. And I believe you are not part of the cohort, but just joining in to listen in, right? So if anybody here is from Lisa cohort, or anybody who's having a startup and would like to, kind of talk about their project, yeah, most welcome. Or else
well, we can, yeah. All right. Well, we can move straight through that. Just 2 secs. Just mindful of, I guess, talking at you, where it's the one voice the whole way through. The next step is around building a governance framework that helps you maintain control. Now, this one is the session that we'll go through tomorrow in more detail, and hopefully make it a much more interactive style of a workshop where we can potentially work through some examples and work through some canvases. But the way I look at building a governance framework that helps maintain control, I think of it like the Formula One car. If a Formula One car is probably the most innovative spaces known to mankind, or humankind rather. And if they did not have the controls in place, it would not be able to go, I don't know how fast they go, 250 mile an hour or however fast they go. But it's their brakes that enable them to do that. It's their precision of how quickly that they can change tires, and it's their whole organisation and diagnostics that they have that help a car like a Formula One car go so fast. You must be able to build in those controls at the earliest possibility. And again, if you take the car analogy, yes, you could build a car with the wheels and so forth, but I think right from the start you would realise that you needed to have some sort of stopping mechanism in place to be able to help that. But what is really, really, really important here is you balance out the risk with the opportunity. So you do need to go through what your risk framework are, and you do need to identify what the risks are to your venture. Now, there will be common risks. So there will be financial risks that you'll have. There'll be operational risks, for instance. So from an operational point of view, you may need to have documented standard operating procedures, as an example. But you might be in a business of healthcare, for instance, and that might attract additional risks around, particularly compliance risks and capturing certain information and data, or making sure that that data is absolutely protected and it doesn't get out. So you need to really understand what those risks are. That is pertinent to your product or what you're doing, and you need to be able to cast your mind from where you are today at MVP stage to when it is successful. What are the risks that potentially your product will encounter on the way? Now, again, the message is don't be bogged down too much with it, but just be aware of it and document those risks as you see them, and sense check it with other people. But what's super, super important is you then balance that out with the opportunities. What I see organisations do is they start going down the risk management framework and they forget about all the opportunities that they still have. So you need to put as much weight or as much effort into opportunity management as what you do risk management. Building a business case which will support your ambitions. Now, again, you might be thinking from an MVP stage, do I really need to be thinking about business cases? And the short answer is you absolutely do, because you absolutely need to be able to communicate your proposition to investors, to people, to partners, to whoever it might be. And the business case is such a way that can help you help articulate that. And the sooner that you can start collating that information and understanding where you can draw that information, the better. But you really need to be clear on things like what your assumptions are, as an example. What are the types of, over how long this will take? What are the resources you need? So all of that will come together in a business case. But ultimately, what the business case will do, it will inform you whether your business proposition is going to be commercial or not. The next bit is about making sure that you build in the strong financial control disciplines. And what I think is really important, and the thing that trips up most people at this stage, is that they don't have a grasp on basic accounting and financial management principles. How to set a budget, how to read a profit and loss statement, how to read a balance sheet. And again, while you're at idea to MVP stage, you might be thinking the numbers are small and it really doesn't need that much effort. But you need to be comfortable to make sure that you have those that financial acumen under control, because if you don't, things can get out of hand very quickly. Either you will lose control, or often if it is commercial and you start hitting traction, it will mean that you will get more and more, you'll lose money at a greater rate, at a faster rate, unless you can get this done, get it done quicker. And of course, need to be able to sell, you need to be able to, tell the stories through your controls. And again, like I was talking about, with other things, you don't measure everything. You just have to measure what matters most. And so, the things that you measure at MVP stage will be very, very different to what you measure at operational stage, or when you're finally up and running. But it might be, how many iterations you've got, how many people that you've spoken to get feedback on your MVP, and so forth. So have a real strong think about what you will be measuring and what you should be measuring. Which leads us perfectly into designing a business intelligence capability. And basically this is around making sure that you can stay on track, and that you have a framework to be able to help, to be able to help that. And what we're really talking about here is making sure that you've got some KPIs set that that help you understand the health of where you are and where you're going. And of course, it is the age of digital, so there's 1,000 apps that you can use, and that will help you capture and use this information. But the other thing is, what you really want to do is be able to make sure that this information, you can set it up so that it can be real time, and then it has a predictive element to it. So what we don't want to be doing is looking too far, back. That might be important, but we want to be able to understand what's happening in the future. And again, that whole thing around paralysis of analysis comes into play again, because if you overdo this part, you'll be spending all your time measuring, but you won't be doing anything. And you need to be doing more. And your business intelligence, there's again some principles that you need to follow here. And the first is you need to make it look good. So you need to make sure that people will be attracted and want to read that information. And again, I'm repeating some of the stuff that I had earlier on, but it needs to be simple. It needs to be relevant. So it needs to be actually you can have KPIs set now that would be very appropriate at operational level, but they're not appropriate at MVP level. So for instance, how many iterations you've had, or the money that you've invested into getting your product up and running. It needs to be transparent. So you just need to make sure that the information can flow and it's open and available. Equally, the flip side of that is, of course, if some of the information is private, then you need to be really, really cognizant of that and protect customers or individuals or other companies' data. You need to make sure that it is unbiased. Now here, this is again another risk that you will have, and why it's also important not only that you structure it in here, but you get independent advisors around you. But it needs to be unbiased. I work with many startups, and particularly at this stage, that are so emotionally attached to their concept that even when they do prepare analysis, and when they try to build a business case, it will be very biased, and you can make a spreadsheet tell you whatever you want it to tell you if you so desire. So you need to be really cognizant of the fact that of what the emotional attachment will be. Now, the emotion stuff can really come into it, and to tell stories and to connect with it, but the whole thing around building these controls is so that you get an objective look into it. So your business intelligence must be unbiased, and of course needs to tell the story, but it needs to measure the things that matter most and not everything. Otherwise, you'll fall back again into that paralysis by analysis issue. I guess the test, not the test, but the challenge here is how do you be more resourceful with this? So you are at MVP stage, so you do have to think about, as you're looking at your measures, how can you be resourceful in being able to put things together. and making every dollar count by having a profit improvement plan. And again, this is around being at the stage of the MVP, idea to MVP for you. It's about making sure that every dollar that you invest has an impact. And again, that probably does links back into what I was just saying before about being resourceful. You need to be able, sometimes it's not money that will solve all the issues, or cash that will solve all the issues. As you build out your offer or your business model or your product, you need to make sure that you are eliminating waste. In actual fact, it might be eliminating waste that is the very reason for your product or business model's existence. And that gives you a competitive advantage over, a lot of the reason why digital applications work so well is because they take a lot of the waste out of it. And some of the waste is around overproduction, waiting, transportation, moving things from here to there that don't need to be, too much inventory, too much processing. You need to rework things. Yeah. So you need to think about this and make sure that it is built into your structure. You need to make sure that you are reviewing with your suppliers, making sure that you're reviewing your invoices and making sure that you have good controls about what you're actually getting from them is what's being charged, and that you're getting good value. You need to consider your business holistically and not just in part. So for instance, you might have a product that you're going to distribute on an e-commerce channel. And you might be looking that this product is cheap and I can get that from, I don't know, a South Asian country in whatever. But then you need to understand, well, what are the logistics costs that get attracted to that? What are the duty costs that get attracted to that? That's an example, but you need to think, what is your costs end to end as you build your model out. You need to be careful not to be penny wise and pound foolish. This is probably counterintuitive to what I was just saying about being very careful about your costs, but you can be very, you can do silly things. I know this is not at an MVP stage, but I guess it can be likened to it. I know one supermarket here in Australia, they had the plastic bags for the fruit and vegetables, and they got a cheaper supplier and a cheaper product that they were able to do it. And when someone will get their tomatoes and put in the bag wasn't sealed at the bottom and they would just fall straight through. Now that was penny wise, pound foolish, because what happened is they saved a few dollars on being able to get cheaper bags for the fruit and vegetables, but it just annoyed the customers and created a lot of waste. So you just got to make sure that when you save money that you're not creating another problem for you further on. Absolutely, you need to learn some basic negotiation skills and be able to work with your suppliers. So you need to be able to work on the win-win basis, but the win-win is exactly that. It's not, sometimes people confuse that as trying to be too kind and give the suppliers too much power in the relationship. But equally, you need to respect your supplier's ability to be able to make profit, what you want to be able to do. And a key aspect to being commercial is to be able to, is to have the success of your suppliers. And then what you can then do as you start building out from MVP on is that you can start collaborating more and developing new products, new offers, creating new synergies by respecting your supplier's ability to profit. And of course, it's never too early to focus on this stuff. And if you build in those disciplines into your structure now, then that will set you up for the future. And of course, think resourcefulness. So, who can help me? How can it happen? Who's got what I need to make this happen? And this is why, it's very interesting, because most big companies have all the resource in the world, or not all the resource in the world, but they have a lot of resource available to them. But yet how many times do we hear of all the, the Steve Jobs in the garage, creating a $1 trillion enterprise, and that's where it started. And that is often because the entrepreneur and the entrepreneur mindset is of course about being resourceful. And then what's important is that resourcefulness is embedded into the psyche and the culture of the business as it grows and develops. So that is the summary of the commercial model. What I might do, and then I'll spend a few minutes in about 5 minutes to walk through the Moonshot maturity model, which you may want to take offline and be able to attempt. But I thought it might, if anyone had any questions or discussion points they wanted to touch on now. There must be some questions or thoughts.
Yeah.
About you, oh, sorry. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, Matthew. Here's Klaus from Austria.
Hey.
I was talking to like a potential co-founder recently, and we were talking about like important KPIs and metrics to measure. And for me, customer lifetime value has always been an extremely important measure in terms to control costs and optimize channels. Especially in early phase for a startup, you don't have or if you're a subscription business, right? You don't have a survival curve and that kind of stuff. So you don't really know like such an important metric. What is your approach to this? Like how much assumption and just black magic do you apply to understand like what a customer is actually worth to you in the early stage?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, and thank you very much for sharing it. I think there's a couple of things that I want to say is the first is remember why you want to measure something, and that is to be able to steer you and get you to where you want to go to. So if you try to measure something that actually can't be measured, then don't do it. You're probably going to have to rely upon your own intuition and your own experiences and your own understanding of the world, because you can spend a lot of time trying to measure something that you just can't. And then what happens is if you're trying to measure something that can't be measured, that's absolutely when the bias comes in, and that you will sort of potentially create measures that don't fit. Also, the message that I said around be careful not to have too many KPIs. So, you can get that completely wrong at the moment. But break down your business into what the core components are. Think about your strategy and think about your purpose, and go, what is the one thing I need to know when I wake up in the morning to know that things are on track? And if you ask yourself that question, often it comes out. And then if you actually observe your own behavior throughout the course and look at the questions that you're asking people all the time, and that will probably, or not only the questions that you're asking, because that's trying to inform you, but also what you're communicating to other people on a regular basis, that's probably a hint as well about what's important.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, it does.
But sometimes, and the other important thing there is they can change. You can't make KPIs just suit, put one in now and, oh, that didn't quite work out, or the results aren't exactly what I wanted, so I'm going to change it. But equally, you also need to understand that you'll be at very different stages of maturity, and KPIs will evolve depending on what your objectives are. But they have to be linked to your objective. That's fundamental. And it needs to link back to your strategy.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts? Must be one more. Deepti, did you have any observations for the group at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually been enjoying listening to you about, especially the bias you said that people are, able to kind of, form because of their own assumptions that they have about it. So, I mean, I found that point pretty interesting. What I was also thinking is, I don't know if it's a possibility, and still, if you have time, to take people through one of the activities that, you kind of skip through, and that would actually get people a little bit more
Yeah.
engaged.
Well, I'll walk through these canvases now, but this comes to more for this may be more at a strategic level, but it will certainly show where it links in. So why don't I just run through this now, and that might help. And some of this, so what I want to do is I've got this, what I call the maturity model canvas, or moonshot maturity model canvas. And this links back into what I was saying before around getting basics right and getting the fundamentals. But, start with your question about, who do you want your organization to be when it grows up? And that should be a really strong starting point. And I know that you would have done a lot of this type of work in your business model canvases and so forth, but think about what great would look like tomorrow. So what does it look like tomorrow? Like, as you're in your MVP stage, visualize it. What does great look like? But what does it look like next year? And what does it look like in 5 or 10 years? What does great look like? And map that out. But you do have to take one small step, right? And again, this stuff is a repeat of, and I won't spend much time on this because it's certainly stuff you would have considered around the as you went through business model canvas stage and so forth. But with your why, ask yourself the questions: what is the big problem you're trying to solve? What is your ambition? What is the legacy you're trying to leave? But importantly, who are you trying to solve the problem for? What is the customer's need? How else can those needs be met? What does the customer need to look like in the future? And of course, how can you meet the customer need? And then the how, and this is probably where we're probably getting into some of the commercial aspects into it, is, what do we value? What won't we compromise on? What do our customers and people expect? And what are your strengths? But how are you going to do it? Who are you? You can summarize that. But you then need to set up your mission control for it. So again, this is an analogy of around, if we're talking about KPIs, and we're talking about, so if you're sending a shuttle to a mission into to Mars or to the moon, there's certain things that you're going to need to know, and think of your business like you need your control room and about what that looks like. But the steps that I've created is you need to make sure it's either you focus on but for you at MVP stage, I've got here fix the basics, but it's certainly around focusing on the basics. And then you work on what your core excellence is, and then developing out your growth in new business, having some big goals, and then of course what your moonshot is. But here's where it gets important. Now, again, I touched on what fix the basics are, or focus on the basics. But this is where it gets into the nuts and bolts of it. So what are the three, so you've got initiative 1, initiative 2. Actually, what are the 3 things that you can do now, or what are the 3 most important things that you can do? Then, what's the time frame that you need to achieve those in? And what are the key activities under that initiative that need to happen? Now, this probably, sorry, I forgot the gentleman's name that asked me the question before, but this is around the KPI bit as well. And this somewhat answers the question. is link your KPI to what the initiative is that you're trying to achieve. So what is the task that you're trying to do? I mean, obviously there's the strategic level, but in terms of the initiative level, what are you trying to do? And what is the KPI that you know you're doing it now? Your MVP, your KPI might be around something around customer satisfaction or something like that. That might be fine, but really link it into what the initiatives are. But you need a number of initiatives to make that work. You need to link it with a KPI. And so forth. So then the way that this will work is that you'll have fixed the basics, then you'll go through your core excellence, growth in new business, but you can keep layering on each other. And it's it's strategic, but it gets very much into the doing part of it, in around what the initiatives are and what the prioritized activities will be. The goal, and then we finally get to the moonshot. And then I would summarize it in a plan, like a summarized plan like that, where you get to know what your key prioritized initiatives are. So yeah, I'm not sure if that helped, Deepy, in terms of looking at that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew, so much. I mean, I believe it was a great presentation covering all 4 topics in such a short time. And of course, I mean, do understand that you could only cover the basics here. And we are definitely hoping to go a little bit deeper into one of these, which is the governance frameworks, which is tomorrow, right? So I would just say thanks a lot for curating this session for Lisa, and it's a great overview of how to think about commercial aspects, and while you're still at your MVP stage, all those things that people kind of forget about and don't, I mean, even if they seem very obvious, but people forget about. So really great that you brought to light about talking about those important elements. Just as a reminder that today's session is one of the 2 sessions, just for the audience here. And we do have the second one tomorrow, which is going to be much more interactive with some sort of workshop and activities around one of the elements, which is the governance framework. And also Matthew is sharing all of these workbooks with you. So, I mean, like he right now went through all the basics, but there were certain questions and activities to really help you through the process. Which you saw that he kind of skipped through during this process. So definitely have a look at those, and I'm pretty sure they'll be very valuable as you start thinking through those questions. And if you have any questions, again, I mean tomorrow again Matthew is here, but of course you can send it to us at Lisa, and then also directly to Matthew if you like, and we'll get answered.
And I think that the key thing today is really to land the message around what the mindset is needed around being commercial and what some of the fundamentals are. Deepti was right. Some of this you can, to develop a KPI, you're right, KPIs, that could be a session on its own. So you can go in deep, and I think it's just a matter of understanding what's important to your business and then diving deep into that. But as we said, tomorrow we'll dive deeper into some of the governance issues and how we can help there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Matthew, for coming on board and creating this for us, and especially for all the Lisa cohort members. Thanks a lot, and thanks everybody else for joining us. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. And we would have definitely loved more questions. So tomorrow, if you're joining in, come up with more questions, even if it is from today. And good evening, good night, or good morning.
Yes.
Those of you.
Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.